Hello, this is Colin Gomel. In this video lesson, I'd like to show you how to use GameMaker 6.1 to write a very simple game of Breakout. At this point, you should already have downloaded and installed GameMaker 6.1, and what I've done here is to launch the application in the usual way. So first thing we're going to do is go to the File menu. We're going to select New because this is going to be a new game. One other thing we'll do at this point is set GameMaker into advanced mode, as it gives us more options and more facilities at our command on the left-hand side. For the purpose of this game, we're going to need to create a room in which the game is going to be played. A room is like a level, really, in any modern computer game. We'll give our room a name, so let's rename it from Room 0. Actually, let's just call it Level 1. And our game of Breakout can have many levels. I'm only going to do one level at this point, so we'll just have one room called Level 1. First object that we're going to need is going to be a ball object, which is going to bounce around the room. So I'm going to right-click on objects. I'm going to add an object. The object I'm going to add is going to be called ball. It's going to be a ball object. It's going to be a ball object, and in due course, we hope it's going to bounce around the room. We won't have ball object to be visible, but we won't check solid because the general rule in GameMaker is that the moving objects are going to be not solid, and the stationary objects like walls in due course are going to be solid. So I'm going to make my ball visible but not solid. Okay, now by the way, with the object where I right-clicked and did add object, I could just as easily have gone to the add menu and added an object that way, or I could have gone here and added an object here, add an object off of the toolbar across the top. So like most Windows applications, there are many ways to create the same result. Personally, I prefer to right-click on the menus down here and then add the appropriate object as necessary. Now we'll want our ball object to have some visual manifestation, so we'll now add a sprite. I'm going to add a sprite here. The sprite is a 2D graphical image that is going to be associated with our ball. I'll call it SPR underbar ball so that I know what this sprite is. And I'm going to load a sprite from the GameMaker library of sprites. In the default installation of GameMaker, you should find a folder called Sprites. There's a few there for different games, Pac-Man, Maze. The one I'm interested in is Breakout, and I'll use ball2.gif. There it is. It's a ball over here. It starts out 16 pixels by 16 pixels, and it has a black background. I'm going to open that image, and it isn't quite right for my purposes. In order to make this game look right, I'm going to change this sprite so that instead of being 16 by 16, I'm going to edit it. I'm going to transform it, and in fact I'm going to stretch it to a width of 24 pixels. I'm going to keep the aspect ratio, the height changes to 24, and the quality of the transformation I would want to be excellent. So what I have now, when I click this Save Changes button, is a sprite which is 24 pixels by 24 pixels by stretching the sprite from the GameMaker library. Now I don't want the black background to be visible when the sprite appears, when the ball appears on the game, so as usual I'm going to set the background to that particular sprite to transparent, which means you won't see the black background. Let's click on OK at that point. Let's change the size of our grid in the game to 24 by 24. So the grid's now a little larger. Every square there is 24 pixels by 24 pixels. Let's change the object to add with the left mouse to the ball object, and let's click in one of these squares on the grid. I'm going to click right here, and well, that's a little unfortunate. I did forget to make one other change. I need to go back to the ball object, and I need to associate the ball object with the SPR ball sprite. So at this point my ball is associated with that little red ball, which is that sprite up there. We do need to make the association between the object and the sprite. So I'll do that, and there's my ball sitting on the playing field. We'll make one other change before we go too much further. Let's change the settings here to give my room, instead of a width of 640, let's change it to 480 pixels. And let's give it a height of 360 pixels. So I can change the size of the room using the settings tab here. By the way, I can also change the speed at which the game plays, but 30 frames a second, the number of steps per second, is a good speed for most of the games that I've developed. So we'll go back to the room here. I'm going to click on the green arrow and let's run the game and see what it looks like. And as you can see, it looks great, except that we have a ball here and it isn't moving. So that wouldn't be much of a game of Breakout. So we'll go back to design mode for the game. Let's double click on the ball object and let's add an event. The event that we're going to have is the create event. This event will trigger when the ball is created, which happens when the game starts up because the ball is created when the room is created. In fact, it's placed in the room. I'm going to use the middle blue set of arrows here, set a direction of speed of motion. I'm going to drag that image over into the action list. And the direction I'm going to set is random 360. That will set a random direction between 0 and 360 degrees. I'm going to have the ball initially move at a speed of 5 pixels per frame. Remember that there are 30 frames per second in a default configuration of GameMaker, so this ball is going to move at a speed of 150 pixels per second. Okay, when I click on OK, if I run the game now, the ball is created, and as you see, it starts moving in a random direction. Unfortunately, when it reaches the end of the edge of the room, it doesn't stop. So let's click on Escape again. Let's go back to Design mode. And let's add a new object to our system. Let's add a wall object. So instead of object 1, I'll call it a wall. Let's create a new sprite this way. Let's create SPR wall and sprite properties. Let's find a wall sprite. We'll find a good one, I think, in the maze game. Wall.gif. I'll open that one. And let's stop and look at it for a moment. It's 24 by 24, which is exactly the right size for the grid on our game, which was 24 by 24. It's not animated, fine. It's transparent, that's okay. So everything looks fine, the sprite looks fine. We'll click on OK there. So now we have a new sprite called SPR wall. We have an object called wall. The object is associated with the sprite. And since the wall is not a moving object, I'll mark that as solid. That means other objects won't or shouldn't be able to pass into it, move into it. In particular, our ball object, as it bounces around the game field, will not be able to move into the wall, which is, of course, what we want, the right behavior that we want. So let's click on OK here. And let's click on OK here. Let's object to add with left mouse. Let's make that the wall. Now if I press the Shift key down while I left click, I can add the wall to multiple squares on the grid, so I'll do that. Let's put a wall around the edge of the playing field here. Whoops. Let's move that down. I hope this is set up correctly. Let's move it this way. Whoops. If I right click, by the way, I can remove anything I put in the wrong place by mistake. And let's look at our game now. And when we play our game, we see, by the way, I've set this slightly wrongly. So I'll just change the size of the room and make the room a little bit smaller. It's probably the easiest way to fix that problem. Okay, so settings for the room, instead of 360, let's subtract another 24 pixels. So 360 minus 24 is going to be 336. So now, if we run the game, I hope we'll find that the wall... Oh, nope, that's not quite right either. It was the width I needed to change and not the height. Oh dear. So I need to put that back. Sorry about that. Let's see, 336 plus 24. I need to put that back to 360. The width I needed to change was 480 minus 24. which is 456. Okay, sorry about that. That's much better. So now the ball's bouncing around on our game here, and our game here has a wall exactly all the way around it. Our room has a wall all the way around it. Well, of course, the next thing that we'd like to have happen is when the ball hits the wall, I'm going to double click on ball, I'm going to add an event, and I'm going to take the collision event, and when the ball hits the wall, when the ball collides with the wall, I'm going to select this icon here, bounce against objects. I want the ball, when it collides with the wall, to bounce off the wall. So I'm going to drag that off the action onto the action list. The defaults here are fine. We want it to bounce against solid objects. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to run the game. And what should happen is when the ball hits the wall, it should bounce off the wall. And that's exactly what's happening at this point in time. So with that, I'm going to stop this lesson. We've covered quite a bit of ground, and we'll pick it up in the next lesson. Thank you.